Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie and TV discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Fortress, and he works at the Cracker Factory, so you don't have to. Sweet Sean's a Kovacs from the internet.
I'm a pretty big wheel.
And his nickname in middle school was Beaver Boy, but that's only because he wouldn't stop chewing on his own pelt. Bruce Leslie.
I'm still a prickly pear.
He is indeed. And we're back this week to cover the last half of Sweet Tooth. If you go back a couple of weeks, you'll see our first 4 episodes. This here's the last 4 episodes in the first season of Sweet Tooth, and we'll finally get our little Robin rating on here and everything. Because you guys have switched back and forth so many times here, I can't remember who's seen what. Did we all get on this episode for the first half?
We were all on the first half.
Okay, all right. So we'll get into all of those good stuff and see what we think. But before we do want to say a big thank you to those that support us over at patreon.com/HMP. Those people get the pre-show, post-show Dinger Zone. We got a big Dinger Zone this week. It's a pretty good one. So if you'd like to get all that, and of course, it's coming up on the end of the month. So at the end of the month, we have the people that support us over at Patreon vote on the movie that we watch. We haven't gathered up those movies yet, but we'll do so afterwards and probably post those on Monday along with this. So vote on that kind of good stuff, and then we'll watch the movie, and hopefully we'll have a good time. Pick a good one. I don't know what they are this week, but I hope you pick a good one. So we'll do all that kind of good stuff as well. And like I said, patreon.com/HMP. So last time, the first 4 episodes of Sweet Tooth, let's kind of just, before we get into everything, just real quick, I remembered liking those first 4 episodes. Was everybody close to the same page?
I think so.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I loved the first half of Sweet Tooth.
Okay.
It's great.
Yeah, I was coming into the second half here. I was kind of I liked the first half enough, but it didn't give me enough stuff to really latch on to. But we'll get into all the kind of good stuff here before this. But you didn't think you were getting away without getting one of these, did you?
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
Bruce, what do you got?
Well, it just happens this property isn't the easiest one to come up with multiple comic book connections for. But I tried. And it's not every day that a comic gets referred to as Mad Max meets Bambi. But it happens occasionally, like with Jeff Lemire's Sweet Tooth. You may or may not know that Jeff Lemire is from Essex County, Ontario, and he really wanted to work that into his comic story. But comics need sales, and he had to go with a sexier location, so he went with Nebraska. They call them Huskers for a reason, you know what I mean? I thought it was cool when a comic with a somewhat local connection for me was listed as an influence for Sweet Tooth. Scout, War Shaman, is a comic written by a native of Golly Bridge, West Virginia, Tim Truman. It was published by Eclipse Comics. You remember them? From 1985 to 1987. And the story was centered around an Apache living in a dystopian version of the United States that had become a third world country. The comic ran for 24 issues and told how a history of ecological excesses had led other nations to levy vast sanctions against the United States for stealing world resources. And mildly surprising for the 80s, Native Americans in comic books, a critical study, stated that Scout is presented in a respectful and genuine manner with tribally specific cultural ties. Not bad for a comic book by a West Virginian that inspired a Canadian to write a story about a Nebraskan at the end of the world. Eclipse Comics isn't around anymore, but Dynamite Comics stepped up and reprinted the Scout War Shaman trades. So if you're hankering for some dystopian Apache adventure, you might be able to find it on the secondary market. All in all, I suppose I would sum it up by saying if I can't shoehorn in an Alan Moore connection, a West Virginian is a solid second choice. Adam, you got one of those lists?
I do indeed. If that comic book connection wasn't enough to get you excited, let me sell everybody here on Sweet Tooth because this show's got everything. This second half finally has some backstory. We got a menagerie of half-breeds, tanks driving over cars, darts, blueberry wine, a Reese Darby cameo. Got to get excited for that. Douglas Adams is Dr. Robotnik. Fleur-de-lis, firework attacks, a manhole in a church, a little beaver kid that's probably the cutest thing I've seen this week, and now with 5 times more Forte. This show's got everything, guys.
5 times more Forte.
It's like I was so, like I said, I didn't know I don't know the comic, and him leaving in those first the first episode, I guess.
Yeah, I think the last we saw him was the first episode.
And he was just gone after that, and I was just like, oh crud, because we all mentioned how we liked the performance and everything. So I was kind of sad to see him go, but to have this second half really be the story point for this show, I was really excited. Like, really, I hate to say it, but like episode 7 was the thing that like really kind of I liked this show, but like episode 7 leading in, and then of course episode 8 made me like this show so much more.
So it really hooked you right at the end.
Yeah, I think once for me, I would say the first half of this show, at least for me, had a little bit of a problem of too much mystery box, you don't know where everything's going, and I feel like we didn't have enough little clues on the way. I think that if this show, and again, it may be a completely different show if you do it in this way, but much like Lost, as much as Lost was going forward in one direction, and then you would have these flashbacks that led all up to the certain events that you were at. And this show ends up kind of doing that again, more so around in like episode 7 and going into 8. It has that kind of nice flashback, format and everything. You never really question like, oh, where am I now? What time is this? I'm very confused. None of that happens, and I like it. To me, it felt like a much better story structure that I think I would have rather seen parsed out over these 8 episodes, and maybe that would have just made it feel a little bit whole for my case. But that's just my opinion.
Well, they do parse out information in a different way than they do in the books. But I will say that because they know where they're going, the mystery box of Lost, it was never going to be one of those moments where we hit episode 8 and it was going to just be like, come on. Yeah. Like that was never going to happen just because of the source material. And they do stick the landing here, and they stick the landing in a way where you can go either way with it, right? Like, you want more, there's more, but this story is over, and that's great, and that's fun, and that's the way it should be. It's kind of one of those. Go ahead.
Especially these kind of properties where you just can't count on getting a season 2. I feel like you do have to have a season 1 that can stand on its own, especially with sort of the complicated production chain behind this, made by Warner Brothers for Hulu, picked up by Netflix. Like, there's a whole lot of parts involved in the production of season 1 that it might be hard to bring them back so easily for season 2. So it's one that really, really, I think it was important that they give us a season 1 that could work if that's all we got.
And not for nothing, you have quite the uphill climb here with this idea for the show in and of itself, and the reality of life is that all of these kids are going to grow up rather quickly. They are right at that age where they're just about to shoot up. And how much of this show can you do when all of a sudden, the kid's going through puberty?
I mean, like next season they come back and Jep is 7 inches taller. That would be weird.
Got a mustache.
Well, I mean, we're pretty close to that, man. I mean, what is he in real life? 13, like something like that?
Maybe.
And so to have, and it's not just him. I mean, you got the girl who plays Bear. Like, she is not going to look like
she's 31 years old.
But I mean, she's not going to look like she, could pass as a high schooler in 2-3 years. Like, that's going to go away. And so are they going to have a season 2? Do we know that if they're doing that or not?
I don't think that anyone has heard anything about it one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't think, at least it hasn't been, it's one of those neither confirmed nor denied kind of things, I think.
I mean, they barely got a season 1.
It's true. You are right.
But I think, like we said previously, this show looks like it just costs a lot of money because it's very nice looking, and they clearly spend on some sets and stuff like that. And
it has a much better look to it than many of the produced by Netflix original comic book shows and movies lately.
Yeah, I was gonna make this comparison. Like, like we said, you can have as much in this first season as you want and try to make that, cap it off. So it's like, if this is the only thing we got, at least it's interesting enough up to that point, and it's satisfying enough of an ending to make you think like, oh, I wonder what happens afterwards. But it's not like Lock and Key where they decided to just throw everything on the table so fast, and you're just like, I didn't have any time to learn any of these characters or get to be with any of these people for enough time that makes me feel like I care anything about what's going on. At least here, there's great pathos with everybody in the cast. It's really, really great. Spoilers alerts for the second half of Sweet Tooth. At this point, I don't know why you're listening this far in, but when Big Man gets shot, I was just blank faced. That blew me away. I was just like, I wasn't even shocked enough to have like a giant outward, kind of gasp or anything. It was just like, you got to be kidding me. This is like one of the best characters, and you're gonna kill him all. I was like, the stones it takes to do that was impressive.
Without laying out comic book spoilers here, Sean, but I think you'll get what I'm going at. Were you kind of expecting a comic book turn from Big Man that never happened?
I was, but when they kept going back to his past and it's different than what's in the source material, I was like, oh, they're not even going to end up doing that, which I quite honestly, and I've said this previously, I love the books of Sweet Tooth. I think they're great. But I'm at a point in my life where I don't need to get bummed out by the limited time that I have for, watching television.
I've got plenty of organic despair around me. I don't need it for my
Yes. Yes. So to have it be, as uplifting as the show ultimately is. And that's one of the things that I think that we spoke to in the first half. Is that, a lot more happens in the second half than in the first half, because they're just setting tone basically for the first half of this series. It still doesn't stray from the fact that, that it's so hopeful, and and there's like a bit of joy in there even, and discovery and exploring that isn't in the source material. Like, the source material is basically everyone is terrible and everyone is out to get you. But that is not what the themes of this show is. And I like that. I like the change in tone, because it's just where I'm at in my life right now. I don't want to watch something where it's like, oh man, everything sucks and everyone's going to die.
Yeah, I think that is one of the best parts of the show, is that it has that more kind of positive message. It's more about family, be that not, your own family or the family, your adoptive family, so to speak, the people that are around you, who these figures are and stuff, and just seeing Big Man take that role of kind of the father figure, and then learning that backstory that, then just gives so much more weight to his character. And by the way, he's just given a powerhouse of a performance this entire season.
Good job from him.
So good. I just we've had a couple of really great actor discoveries this year, and he's one of those where, when he comes in, it's you can see it. It's all in his eyes. His eyes just tell everything there. And I love when he's on screen and you just get that. And he's, as an actor, you can tell he's put in, he knows all the backstory, he's put all that in, and it comes out without him actually having to say that. And if you think about those first couple episodes and his reaction to him and everything, it all starts to make sense then. It's like, oh, it's just really great work.
So, yeah, I agree. The performances are great. The cinematography on the show is great. They don't skimp on the soundtrack. So why are they able to make this show for less money than the Netflix series Jupiter's Children, or whatever that was called?
Jupiter's Legacy. That's a great question, is how do they make this look good for less money? And I think it boiled down to, it is possible to overpay people. I mean,
yeah.
And it's also possible to underpay him. So I don't know if there's a little bit of one, a little bit of the other, but these folks making this movie knew how to light a scene, something they didn't seem to do on Jupiter's Legacy. And I do understand that different kinds of lighting can be more expensive than others, but at the end of the day, I would think a lot of that comes down to just like know-how.
Yeah.
Well, the two things also that this show has going for it, just budgetary wise, is that they shot it in New Zealand, right? And the second thing is that there's not like superpowers, like you don't have to constantly like dip into your special effects budget on the show. It's a lot of a big black guy and a little white kid walking. Like there's a lot of that.
If you look at the show, particularly as we meet more and more hybrid children, it becomes pretty obvious that they spent all their effort in making Sweet Tooth look great, because the other hybrid children really do kind of look like Halloween costumes. But that's okay, because the other choice is to try to spread it out evenly, and none of them look good. So I think having Gus look just awesome made it easier to put up with the other kids.
Yeah, he
totally
looks so
agree.
good. I again, the ears and the animation, it brings to life and makes you believe that character is this real hybrid creature and everything. It sells it super well, and like I feel I was trying to watch and just see if I could see any of the seams. I think I'm like 98% sure the horns themselves are practical. I still can't tell on the ears though. I feel like they move too well to be practical, but I don't know. It's a tough one. But I wish the beaver would have actually had like proper eyes, because like everything else was real. Like they made like a little beaver puppet, but then then they went ET circa 2002 or whatever it was, where they CGI'd in the eyeballs and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you had it so close.
And that's one of those things I wonder if the choice to go with a puppet for the little woodchuck kid, I wonder if that saved money or cost money, because we're starting to get at this weird crossroads where it's not always easy to know which is the more expensive option.
Yeah, that's true. You can get it all. I'm sure there's so many of those companies that just go.
I learned a lot about relative cost. I learned a lot about relative cost of practical versus digital effects from Seth Rogen when he said it was easier to make a digital model of a styrofoam planet hanging from a string than to make a real one.
Sometimes it'd be like that. Yeah, I thought just this whole structure and everything. I like the guy and what was it? I can't remember all the characters. That's okay. That'll be a complaint for this show, is that I wish people said the characters' names a little bit more.
Yeah, because other than Gus and Bear and Big Man, and I know the Big Man's named Jep, the rest of them's like the Indian doctor, Dr. Robotnik, the nosy neighbor. I mean, there's a whole lot of that going on.
Yeah, I wish
General Beard.
I wish there was a little more of that stuff going on. It would make. You don't got to go to X-Files level where everybody's calling each other constantly, but, say somebody's name, so I'm like, who's this character again? But Forte's character, I love the backstory here, finally figuring out where this guy is from, and, and probably, I would say, up until all the disaster stuff took place, that's about as successful as a first date as you can get right there. That guy, like that. I mean, they did everything.
Oh, did they now?
Well, they drank, they played darts, they there was like 18 different things. Like it was just like you saw all these activities, and you're like, that's like a month's worth of dating. What are you doing there in one shot?
I get the idea. They're in the middle of nowhere though, so you got to do everything every day, or else you go to sleep.
Like, when did you show up to this bar? Was it like 7 p.m. and that's how you could continue to do all these things?
Small town, straight from work to the bar, home, blackout, do it all over.
That's
again.
true. She did say she walked from, it's like, oh, I just live down the street. I apparently walk down here to get hammered, once a month, but doesn't know that they don't have her particular brand of whiskey. And by the way, if you're going into that place, why do you think they got Wellers? What's wrong with you? You're not going to get that good of a hooch up in that little dive bar place. But then,
if you don't ask. Maybe they have one bottle for special occasions in the back because they never thought anybody would ask for it.
But the hilarious part is then she goes, well, just give me your bottom shelf crap. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Do you like good booze or not? I'm confused.
I think it's funny that she thinks they have more than one shelf. Like, I've been into places like this. They only have one shelf.
They've got your crappy whiskeys and your halfway decent ones and stuff like that. There's a difference between Jim Beam and whatever. Buffalo Trace or something. That's obviously too much of an easy
Okay,
go-to,
because
but-
I've been in places where like the Jim Beam's the good stuff.
Oh man, you've been in a really bad place. So what truck stop was this again?
One about like this one here in Nebraska that they're in.
Oh man. But I like the story. It was just can anyone explain exactly how these things are made? Because they like inject stuff into like an egg? And that's what
it
then
looks like
makes
they
the
used
baby.
a chicken egg. I didn't see that coming, but
I
she
was
says something
confused.
about filling in the gaps in human DNA. So I guess they're using animal DNA to fill in the gaps, and then they put the genetics into the fertilized chicken egg, and a hybrid grows out of it or something.
Yeah, I'm surprised we didn't see any of them hatch. Maybe that was too much money.
Oh, it'd be like a Jurassic Park moment.
Because you mentioned it right there with the the gene splicing, filling in the gaps and stuff like that. I mean, that's straight Jurassic Park. So
That's all Jurassic Park, yeah.
oh, why not? But I mean, I just thought that was interesting because she goes through, and I kind of like this when shows do, it's the Star Trek thing where you say enough stuff and we just kind of go like, that sounds about right. This show does enough of that as well to where it's just like, okay, I mean, as long as that's what you say it is, and I'll certainly buy that.
And also, there's a part of me that feels like maybe the chicken eggs weren't actually part of the script or the story, but it just worked well visually and was kind of plugged in there, and that's why you don't have that addressed as directly as maybe you'd want.
I feel like she mentioned the eggs or something at some point. I could be wrong.
Oh, okay. They could have at least used ostrich eggs.
Yeah, something a little bit bigger that you think a human child could pop out of, as opposed to something the size of, an egg, like a small like chicken egg. That's no good. Well, at least it's not a quail egg. If a child came out of a quail egg, you can put that kid in your pocket, I guess.
Well, the thing is, they all start with 2 cells, and you work from there.
So, what do we think about our like kind of big bad here, Mr. Beard and Goggles? That's
I love
choice.
the character design. Like
I do too.
Yeah.
This is a show that has all kinds of half human, half hybrid children, and he looks the most like a comic book character. So I love it.
Yeah.
Just the bald head, the big goggles, giant beard, perfect.
I mean, you nailed it in one when you called him Robotnik.
Yeah. Hey, who I feel like could have maybe they couldn't afford him or something, and no disrespect to the actor that's playing the role, but can't you see Jackie Earle Haley in this role?
Oh yes,
I see.
I mean,
I'm
there's
watching.
a lot of this
I'm
kind of
watching
thing.
this. I'm like, oh man, Jackie Earle Haley would be like chewing. this scene.
He's one of my favorites, so I see him in all these kind of roles.
I would have been excited for that, but the guy who did it did a fantastic job. I'm not to take away.
I thought you were going to say like they probably couldn't afford him and throw out like Ben Kingsley or something, who also would have been awesome.
Yeah. But they landed on Neil Sandylance. That's his name.
I am not familiar with this gentleman. Has he been in anything we've seen?
I haven't seen much of the Flash TV show after I want to say 3rd season. But Bruce, I know that you watch CW a lot. Have you? Do you remember?
I did up until the pandemic, and I've like kind of checked out around the time the pandemic got here. But I may remember the character. Tell me more.
He's the thinker on the Flash.
Oh, absolutely. He was sort of bound. He was portrayed as like a paraplegic. Yeah, I remember him absolutely. Looked very, very different in the Flash than he does here, but a comic book villain both times.
He's on the Americans. I don't remember him in that, even though I've seen a lot of it. His biggest role is he's in News of the World, the Tom Hanks cowboy movie.
That was an Apple thing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Seems like it because I didn't watch it. And I don't see much on Apple.
Hey, Tom Hanks did like 2 or 3 Apple movies that like
I
next
did
to
see
no
the
one
one
saw.
where he's in a boat.
The submarine one?
Yes.
Yeah, the Wolf of
Greyhound.
something. I don't know. Yeah, that's
Greyhound.
it. Greyhound.
Oh, all right, I'll have to check that one out.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's pretty good.
okay, we'll certainly check on that. Now, overall, I did like this one more, this half more than the previous half. I just think it's really just finding out more about these characters, who they are. I like the fact that we assume perhaps that, for lack of a better word, mom is dead. And turns out she's not at the end, which I liked. I thought that was like a great thing. And again, that's another one that like this is one that I would honestly be a little bit. I don't want to say upset. That might be a little harsh of a a little much of a word. But I would really like to see a season 2 after this on account of
I'm with you on that.
They left it at a really good place. They built up enough. They did what most of these shows don't tend to do, which is, give you enough and then leave you at wanting a little bit more at the end. And I feel like with somebody like Robert Downey Jr. behind as like one of the executive producers and stuff, I feel like that at least gives this show a little bit more cachet and a little bit better chance of getting a season 2 than perhaps like a Jupiter's Legacy.
The drawback is he's also very likely to be involved with so many other projects he never really feels the need to come back to it.
Yeah, but
It's true.
Well, from what I understand though, he was the one who like really championed this and went out for it and wanted to go at it and just like this is what I want to do, and so it was kind of his baby. So I feel like even though he may not, have the probably day-to-day work with it as well, but I couldn't see him not going and saying like, hey, let me see if we can get a season 2 out of this. And Lord knows he's got enough money to where he can just be like, I could put up half of it.
I would certainly be all for a season 2 of Sweet Tooth, but I could also see he now has his new baby that he would be pushing. Some folks are like that. It's always about the next thing, not the last thing.
What in the books and stuff? What were all the different were the animal hybrid kids? Were they much like the ones that we're seeing here, or were they fairly different from that? How are they the same and or different?
Well, they're not as cute. That's the first thing. Is that Gus is basically the cutest one. There's
and he's kind of gangly, right? I mean, wouldn't it be fair to?
He's super skinny and like a deer,
Mm-hmm.
And for part of this too, Jeff Lemire did the art, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand his art style a little bit, Adam. So it's not a cute art style.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and so when you're looking at these kids, and it looks like a lot of the animal babies are from Jim Henson's workshop. It's a very different feel than when you see the moose child in the source material, where you're like, oh, that is not great. That I would hate to come across that person, And so that's again the feeling of dread that is in the source material is not here. And it's the biggest difference, like Bruce, I know you were talking about your friend with Sweet Tooth.
Yes.
That they had read all of it and they didn't want to watch the TV show except for in chunks, right?
Yes.
Has he seen all of it?
I don't think so. I'll have to ask him if he's ever come back to it. But I get the idea he kind of checked out and didn't come back to it. And sometimes that can maybe be the problem. Like even knowing, like I didn't read all the comics. I haven't read them like you have or like Chris has, but just knowing enough about where the comics go, I've always I'm sitting here waiting for that knife in my back, so it made it a little more difficult for me to just relax and enjoy it like I maybe could have if I had been totally naive to it.
Right.
Yeah, I guess, because that was pretty much my standpoint, having, only known the book in name, of course. But, yeah, I never, I feel like there's obviously the sense of doom because we're in this kind of, I don't want to call it necessarily post-apocalyptic, but it's like
it's
that.
It's dystopian to say the least.
Dystopian, that's a better word.
I would say it's the same sort of world you're getting in The Walking Dead.
Yeah, that's dystopian's a much better term for it. But yeah, so with all that kind of going on, it's there, but it doesn't feel oppressively like, oh God, something horrible is like. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't know anything was that could possibly be on the horizon and stuff like that. Because, like you said, overall, that's what kind of drew me to the show. Is that while things are difficult for these characters, or every single one of them is coming up across another hurdle that they've got to get over, everyone is still positive. They're
Yes.
striving for a goal that may not be reachable, but at least they feel like we can still continue to try to be happy in these horrible times.
at the core, not only do you have a child, which, you know, by nature, a child's somewhat innocent and maybe not as cynical to the way the world can be, but then to have a child who's absolutely been detached and sheltered out in the woods like this, thrown into this dystopia. Well, you know, it definitely has both room for the hope from the child and then the fear as the watcher about how this poor sheltered child is not cut out for what he's going to run into.
Yeah. And speaking of kids, let's just talk about the kids' performances. We often talk about, you know, great child performances, and man, oh man, they do not skimp on them here. You know, Christian Convey, the kid that plays Gus, is just fantastic. I would like that kid. He's one of those that, like, this is to me, especially with a child actor, when you can tell that they've started to understand their craft better than most, is that when they're sitting and doing nothing, they still are acting. You can still see it. It's just like he's not waiting for his line. That kid's thinking about something because it's been put in his head. Think about this. Look at here. Da 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 da. And it works. The kid is acting the entire time, and it's just so darn good. And what's the girl's name again? Bear. She's fantastic. Bear. She's fantastic as well. That's another one. Super shocked about her. I was at first I'm like, oh, another plucky kid here, and no, she's fantastic. She's really good as well. I love seeing great acting, especially when it comes from kids, and we're still in that golden age. I'm so proud. All right,
she's in a lot.
Is she in stuff?
Stefania, yeah, she's in a lot, man. She's in Krampus. She's in The Lovely Bones. That seems to be about it.
That's what I'm saying. She's a little bit, probably a little older than you think she is, because that stuff's not exactly yesterday.
No, those are a little bit old. Let's see, what's IMDb? 1997, so.
97, yeah.
She's up there a
so
little.
That means she's what, 34? I'm not good at math.
I'm not either, so I'm just like, carry the 3 plus
24. I was only off by 10 years, 24. So that's what I'm saying. A 24-year-old might still be able to look about the same at age 26 or 27. Yeah. But the others, they're in trouble.
And like I always say, if you want to keep these kids small, you give them the Mickey Rooney treatment of coffee and cigarettes and try to keep them tiny while they continue on their Hollywood dreams. Nothing wrong with that. We worked in Hollywood in the 40s. It'll work today. No? All right, fair.
Hopefully when they're in their 80s, like when Mickey Rooney was, that they'll be just as awful and racist.
Mickey Rooney was like...
Hopefully.
So I know somebody that so Mickey Rooney was at Dragon Con, right? And he was sitting over in a booth, and surprisingly, the people at Dragon Con were not lining up in droves to get Mickey Rooney's autograph. So I know somebody that was like up getting an autograph in something, and... just at a different table, caught eyes with Mickey Rooney, gave him a little wave, and he looked right at her and just went, ugh, just like gave a grimace. It was just like, oh my gosh, dude.
It would have only been better if he popped up the middle finger.
He's just someone's being nice to you at a convention, just saying, hi, how are you? And he's just like, you.
The only regret I have about not being an elderly celebrity is that I don't get a chance to do that myself to somebody.
That's true. You know who else is bad at that? I'll throw him under the bus because he needs it. Anthony Daniels. Also, I heard, was just, if you're a kid, he's fantastic. But if you're an adult, he has zero time for you. That's what I've seen. That's been my experience watching the man over the years.
That's the same with me.
It's like, I don't know, kids, I'll be nice to you, but the adults, y'all can just get out of here. I don't want to talk to you.
Scram.
You like C-3PO? Big whoop. Who doesn't? Get out of here. All right. Anything else? Any other kind of? That's the tough part. Is that, like I said, for me, the show really didn't kick in until those last 2 episodes, and I'm like, we're getting started.
I'll say is, like, I was totally enamored with the magic of the show in the first half. Like, it all seemed so totally new to me. By the second half, well, I'd already experienced the first half, so I didn't quite have that same wave of kind of like magical joy over me. So I probably enjoyed the first couple episodes better than the back half, but I still enjoyed it all the way through good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I want a season 2 of this show. And I want to see the same people in the show. I don't know if we'll get that. I don't know if we'll even get a second season. And if we don't, I'm okay with it, but I would like to see more of this. I do enjoy Sweet Tooth, and I enjoy the performances and the cinematography, and I mean, hell, the writing is great. You know, this is a top tier show, and I'd like to see more.
Definitely hope there's a season 2. It made me so happy to see Big Man open his eyes and go like, oh, he's at least going to be alive for a little while longer. Oh, thank God. I'm like, man, that
really thought his ticket had been punched there.
I did too. I was just like, oh man, what a gut punch. How is this show going to survive a season 2? Because people are going to be like, I'm not watching that show. They killed that nice man who just wanted nothing else but to help the kid that he couldn't help. You know, he couldn't help his own kid or whatever. We don't even know that backstory properly yet. But like, he had a thing in the past and he sees something in this kid and, you know, wants to help. And then just to get wiped out, it was just like, I was just awestruck. I was just like, man, this show has some guts. But I'm so happy that they relinquished him. We're like, no, he's okay. It's all right. He's still alive. But all right, before we get to our review here and everything for the entire season, we do have to ask ourselves one very important question: is how does this television program relate back 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone?
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement.
Oh.
I wrote today's Stallone connection in 2019 when we reviewed Avengers Endgame, and since he's the producer of Sweet Tooth, today's Stallone connection is Robert Downey Jr. I've changed literally nothing. It's June 15th, 2008 at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. The LA Lakers are hosting the Boston Celtics for Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Sitting courtside is the incredibly talented but incredibly troubled Robert Downey Jr. He's had one of the most publicized downward spirals of his generation, which included breaking into a random family's home. And in 1999, a judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison for repeatedly violating his parole on weapons and drug charges. But it's June 2008. And Robert Downey Jr. has kept whatever personal demons he might have been dealing with out of the media for the last couple of years now. Publicly, no one's sure if he's actually clean or if he's just keeping it out of the public's eye. But he's also had a movie that's been in theaters for almost 2 months. And it's called Iron Man. Not only is it successful, it's about to launch Downey into a level of superstardom that if it had happened even 5 years earlier, the Marvel Cinematic Universe might not have ever come to be. And while there are many other celebrities watching the Lakers in the Staples Center that night, the TV cameras keep looking over at RDJ. And he's not on his phone. He's not distracted. He's in the moment. He's into the game, enjoying himself, looking happy and healthy. But why do the cameras keep looking over at Robert Downey Jr.? Well, maybe because it's LA, and if there's one thing the town loves more than a winner, it's a comeback story. And Robert Downey Jr. is most definitely that. Maybe it's because he's surprisingly into the game, because who would have guessed that Robert Downey Jr. is a basketball fan? Or maybe it's because Robert Downey Jr. is sitting next to his friend and fellow actor, Sylvester Stallone. In 2008 at the Staples Center, Stallone is on his phone. He looks uncomfortable. And maybe it's because Stallone has been trying to finish his Edgar Allan Poe screenplay with Robert Downey Jr. as Poe. Or maybe it's because the Celtics beat the Lakers that night, 98-88. But when the cameras keep looking over at these two friends, Robert Downey Jr. and Sylvester Stallone, one thing is very clear. Robert Downey Jr. is very much enjoying himself, and Sylvester Stallone very much is not. In 2008, Sylvester Stallone also has a movie that opened 6 weeks earlier, and that's 2008's Rambo. And it does well at the box office, grossing $113 million worldwide, but Stallone is clearly not happy with the way that the movie turned out. And he's a couple of years away from the franchise that revitalized his character for the 10th time, The Expendables. But at the Staples Center in 2008, watching these two movie stars sitting next to each other, it's a perfect snapshot of where they are in this moment in 2008. Downey on his way up, Stallone stagnant. Now, today in 2019, it's hard to remember that Robert Downey Jr. wasn't always the most important and most successful movie franchise of all time. And the only person who changed our minds about Robert Downey Jr. was Robert Downey Jr. himself. So, sorry. So since this is probably Robert Downey Jr.'s last movie in the MCU, I just wanted to thank him for these 11 years. It spawned a whole new generation of superhero fans, and at times makes me feel like a kid again. By the way, the Celtics would end up beating the Lakers that year. Go Celtics. Thank you. I'm Sean Kovacs. Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, condolences to Robert Downey Jr. Just lost Robert Downey Sr., a fantastic filmmaker and everything. And that guy, he was around forever, man. But good long life for Robert Downey Sr. there. If you hadn't seen Putney Swope, do yourself a favor. All right, so let's get down to it here at Hero Movie Podcast. We have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to check that out, head on over to our subreddit, reddit.com/r/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there, pinned to the top. Bruce, where does Sweet Tooth Season 1 fall on the Robin rating system for you?
Well made, enjoyable enough. I mean, it clearly deserves a Tim Drake, so I'm going to give it a Tim Drake. But for me, there was some weird principle or some weird component to it that, like, I was never rushing to watch it. Like, I was happy enough to watch it for the show, but like I watched the first half for the podcast and I didn't feel like compelled to go back to it until we covered the second half. So even though it's good, there was something about it that I guess wasn't quite like addicting or engaging for me, but I still give it a good solid Tim Drake. There's nothing bad about it. It just didn't seem to get its claws in me like I expected it to.
Fair enough. Sean?
Yeah, for me, it's a Tim Drake also. I really, really enjoyed this show. I want to see more of this show. But like Bruce says, you know, there is no sense of urgency in watching this show, which is great. That means that you can watch it on your own time and it's funsies and you don't have to worry about hitting deadlines or getting spoiled by other people. And that's more on the general public than it is on the show. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a Tim Drake for me.
Yeah, Tim Drake's all around. I wasn't overly in love with it, but man, it won me over by the end. And also, it's one of those things that, like, subsequent stuff can make your previous stuff kind of shine even more because now you've got more context and more, you know, all that kind of good stuff. And that's what this was for me. I liked it a whole bunch. Definitely want to see a season 2. Wouldn't be shocked because Netflix has been, you know, for a moment, Netflix and a couple of these other places were just going, oh, you get another season, you get another season, you get another season. And now they're kind of pulling strings a little bit more and going like, well, that didn't do as well as we thought and kind of shrinking back on it. But I certainly hope that is one that happens here, and I feel like there's, like I said, a good chance that Robert Downey Jr.'s name being attached to this will have a little bit more juice than you know Fred Jones, if he tried to produce this. So I feel like there's probably some of that in the future, and but if there's not, we definitely got a good first season here. And like you said, I think I'm exactly at that same boat to where it wasn't one that I jumped out to and it got the claws in and was saying, yes, this is something that you need to come back to and can't wait and finish. You know, for each of these, I hit all 4 episodes, you know, like just before the day before the podcast. So it's it's there, but it's only there if you kind of want it to be, I suppose. But it doesn't take away from it. Doesn't take away from it being a good show. So check that out. It is available right now on Netflix. Next week, we're not 100% sure what we're doing because we do have that Dinger Zone, or excuse me, not Dinger Zone, but the Patreon vote coming up. We haven't picked those movies, but we'll probably do that in maybe the after show or something. What's the after show, you say? Head on over to patreon.com/HMP, and you can vote and listen to all that kind of good stuff as well. So check all that out. Bruce, in the meantime, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
Well, I'm always asking people to check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/Bruce Leslie. Lots of anime coverage there. Whole lot of detailed coverage on Attack on Titan. Just wrapped up some coverage on Jujutsu Kaisen and getting ready to dive into some Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. But more importantly, I want to ask you to check out my other podcast. It's called Anime IO. I do it along with my friend Chris, who you may know from the Chubby Wizard podcast. Well, we basically retired Chubby Wizard. Now we're doing Anime IO, and we're talking about anime and manga and having a lot of fun doing something different.
Get on board, people. Bruce Leslie, almost at 4K over there on the YouTubes. He's doing like I'm so happy that Bruce is just doing great, and it's like so much interaction and everything over there. I love it so much. Sean, what else?
Go to our 30 Questions podcast. Marvel 30 Questions, where each week we ask 30 questions of the latest Marvel television series. And we are hitting the finale of Loki this week, so please check that out.
Big giant stuff. So find that wherever you find podcasts. That is it, everybody. Join us next week when we're talking about our Patreon Select Force with Sean Kovacs from the internet and Bruce Leslie. I'm Adam Portress. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.
It's been getting so hard living with the things you do to me. My things are getting so strange. I like to tell you everything I see.
Oh, I see a man at the back. As a matter of fact, his eyes are as red as the sun. And the girl in the corner, let no one ignore her, 'cause she thinks she's the passionate one. Oh, yeah!